Another day in Diablo 4 and another glitch being discovered by the Chinese community. This one allows you to farm a ridiculous amount of additional boss loot, which also means you'll be able to farm a ridiculous amount of additional mythic items. Now, the glitch method we're going to be going over in this video is not actually the method that I was originally talking about, that the Chinese community discovered this glitch of. This is a different glitch, essentially using the exact same mechanic, just in a different piece of content. And make sure to subscribe because either later today or tomorrow, I will be doing a video on that main glitch that was discovered that is in some ways much more ridiculous than this version. They're just different pieces of content. So if you're farming different things, you can utilize this in multiple different ways. Now, this specific utilization of this glitch method is essentially just going to be giving you double loot for any boss you're facing. Just that double loot is not necessarily going to be from the same boss you're actually farming. So this is specifically going to be for boss ladder bosses, and outside of needing one specific point in your skill tree, you're just going to use the normal skill tree setup that you would normally be using for boss ladder farming, which I would recommend going the Nemesis portals and just buffing up the monster power through any of the other nodes you can for those layer bosses. Now, the additional loot you're going to be getting for every time you kill pretty much any ladder boss is going to specifically be loot from the Beast in Ice. So you're going to be getting the Beast in Ice uniques, but because it is boss loot you're getting, it still has the higher chance to give mythics, because going and spam farming boss layer bosses is still one of the best ways in the game to just farm up mythics. It's just increasing that for no additional cost and no additional time invested. And there's only two prerequisites for this farm. First off, your boss ladder keys. You're going to have to be opening up the chest to get the loot out of it and re-kill the boss. And then you're going to need one node in the boss ladder skill tree called Out of the Cold. When fighting a boss in a Nightmare Dungeon, the Beast in Ice has a chance to appear and attack you. When this occurs, killing the Nightmare Dungeon boss has a chance to drop unique items from the Beast in Ice's hoard chest. And you're probably confused as to why we're taking a node that only affects Nightmare Dungeons if we're farming layer bosses. And that's where the glitch comes into play. So once you have the prerequisites and everything set up, you're going to start a Nightmare Dungeon sigil. Doesn't matter what it is, so I'd recommend crafting some of the base Nightmare Dungeon sigils. Doesn't matter what it is again, because you're not going to actually be running it. So you start up your Nightmare Dungeon sigil, you teleport to that dungeon. So now when you're in the Nightmare Dungeon where you just created the sigil with, you are then going to reopen your map and teleport to whatever boss layer you want to be farming. So let's say you want to farm Varshan, you're just going to teleport to Varshan's dungeon. Then when you are in Varshan's dungeon, so just right at the entrance, you are then going to start another activity. Now I would recommend just using an Infernal Hordes key, because those are so plentiful and you probably have like 100 plus of them, and you can't actually get anything out of destroying them or selling them or anything like that. So I just recommend using an Infernal Hordes key. Now that will close that Nightmare Dungeon you started. And once you've done all of that, the glitch is now activated. You are going to go to the boss arena and you are just going to start farming the boss. But what you'll notice is that when you kill the boss, it will drop Beast in the Ice loot at your feet when the boss is dead. Now that's before opening the chest and getting that boss's loot. So every time you summon and re-kill that ladder boss, it will be giving you essentially a Beast in the Ice's hoard chest every time you kill whatever boss you're facing. So it'll drop a boss trophy at your feet and it'll drop a bunch of random uniques. Now it doesn't drop everything like it's a normal boss chest, because it doesn't drop any layer boss keys and you can't modify it with some of the other nodes. For instance, a node that turns everything that aren't uniques or mythics from a hoard chest into gold. Stuff like that won't work on this, but it will drop you a bunch of uniques from the Beast in Ice, and because it is considering you killing a boss, it can also drop you mythics like you were farming the Beast in Ice. Now, if you don't care about any of the uniques that the Beast in Ice drops, you're primarily just doing this to add additional chances to get mythic items, because again, you're essentially doubling your chance to get mythics from these bosses. Now, the one thing you can't do is teleport back to town. If you teleport back to town, you have to go start up another nightmare dungeon and do the whole activation process we went over, because if you just teleport back to town and go back, you will no longer be getting the Beast in Ice loot. But what's actually interesting is that if you get a Nemesis portal, it actually won't disable this glitch. So what you can actually do is when you get a Nemesis portal, go in, take the Nemesis portal, go defeat the Nemesis bosses, and then you just teleport straight back to the boss that you've been farming, so that boss layer, and it'll actually stay activated. The only problem is that killing a boss a few times and getting a Nemesis portal, you'll probably be filled up on loot. So outside of getting a Nemesis portal, you may want to just keep loot building up on the ground while you're farming this boss, kind of like what we had to do in the past where you could just farm bosses so quickly and you just throw loot on the ground before a loot filter. Just kind of build up the loot on the ground, and then once you're ready, then go back to town and make your few trips back and forth to get rid of all that stuff, because again, right when you go back to town, it will disable this glitch and you have to use another Nightmare Dungeon Sigil and another Infernal Hordes key to get this glitch to work again. But that isn't really that high of a cost when you're essentially doubling your chances at getting a mythic, or at least somewhere within that realm. Now, if you are looking for uniques from the Beast in Ice, this is actually ridiculously strong. For instance, I'm playing a druid and the Beast in Ice drops multiple rings and a necklace for druid, all of which are usable in certain builds. So those are actually a bunch of items that you need. Very good rolls on them with a bunch of different multiplicative aspects on them, or you'll just be losing massive damage if you don't have that. So just constantly getting a bunch of free versions of those is actually ridiculously strong for a lot of builds. Now, I haven't actually tested doing this glitch while farming the Beast in Ice itself. My presumption is that it would work, because this is something that shouldn't work in general for any boss. So my assumption is that it will actually just work. So it'll still give you that additional loot at your feet. And even if you were just trying to get loot from a Beast in Ice, I'd still just recommend farming a different boss. There's most likely something from a different boss you would want, even if you're just thinking about some other build in the future. And if you want nothing else at all and you have greater layer boss keys, I'd recommend farming those, because they just have a higher chance to give mythics than the initiate bosses do. And that is also another thing I'm not sure on. I'm not sure if you go and face greater layer bosses, if this Beast in the Ice additional loot you're getting, if it will also be considered a greater boss and have the higher chance to give you mythic drops. I'm not sure on that. My presumption there is that it wouldn't work like that. It would still just work like it was the Beast in Ice, which is an initiate layer boss. But if you're trying to get more mythics, or the most mythics possible, farming a greater layer boss that has a higher chances, and then also getting the additional chances from this Beast in the Ice loot would be a higher chance than farming an initiate layer boss. But realistically, just farm whatever boss has the uniques you're currently looking for. But that's pretty much the entirety of this glitch, and it really reminds me of the Stronghold glitch. If you remember when the Stronghold was introduced into the game, and then like a handful of seasons after, you could start a Nightmare Dungeon with a Stronghold affix on it, and then you could just go to any of the boss layer dungeons, and Herodic Strong Rooms could randomly spawn in those, and you could just keep teleporting back to any boss dungeon, and it just had a chance to have a strong room in there. So this works in a very similar way to that, just a little bit differently, because you have to, start up another key on top of your Nightmare Dungeon Sigil, but it's a very similar glitch to that. This one is just much, much better for mythic farming in general. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.